Welcome back, beautiful people. You're listening to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Now, up in just a few, we have the Scandals segment with Imran Ansari of Aidala Bertuna Kamin, otherwise known as ABK Law, right here in New York City. We're going to be chatting about the ongoing legal issues Alec Baldwin will be facing over the next few weeks. Okay, so Alec Baldwin didn't know the gun was loaded. He pulled the trigger of a prop gun while filming on set for the film Rust. Next thing you know, the film's cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins, is dead, and the film's director, Joel Souza, wounded. Proper compliance with safety issues or lack thereof on this set will be a large general question that will be asked in the weeks to come. That will have a huge impact on any potential legal matters that may arise from this case. According to experts on the worst side of the scale, he could have potential criminal issues that would range from criminal negligence to intentional acts that may have caused this tragedy. Could Baldwin be criminally prosecuted? You bet he could. New Mexico criminal statutes provide that involuntary manslaughter is a fourth degree felony. Involuntary manslaughter consists of manslaughter in the commission of a lawful act which might produce death without due caution and circumspection. And conviction of involuntary manslaughter is punishable by up to 18 months in prison and up to $5,000 in fees. And come to think of it, that may be his best case scenario. Now, defenses are that the death was an accident and the person was not acting in a reckless manner or with criminal negligence. It's a tough one. But here to break it all down is legal expert Imran Ansari. Welcome back to the Scandals segment. And what a scandal this is, Imran.
Great to be back, Sen. And yes, Hollywood is reeling. The nation is reeling at this accident. But was it an accident or was it negligence? And I think that is the big question before us, and whether that negligence has risen to the level of criminal culpability. As you stated, Zen, the investigation by law enforcement is underway, and there's a lot of question marks here. But I think that there is going to be a legal avalanche following this incident, whether that be rising to the level of those criminal charges that you just discussed, or tons of lawsuits that come out through the family of Halyna Hutchins, and also Joel Souza himself, who was also wounded in this incident.
Exactly. And it's true that Alec Baldwin has the defense, though, that assistant director Dave Halls handed him the prop gun and told him it was a quote unquote cold gun, what we call in a movie set when the gun is not loaded with live rounds. But Dave Halls worked for the production company, Imran, which Alec Baldwin controlled as an executive producer. And this is key. Alec was not just hired talent on this film set, he was one of the bosses on set. And is this going to play into the severity of the legal implications? You tell me.
Right. So you hear about the trickle down effect. Well, in law, sometimes it's the trickle up effect. And those who are in the position of making critical decisions about, say, here, a production, and that was Alec Baldwin as the producer of this shoot, it could trickle up to him, because if he cut corners, or his production company cut corners in the making of this film, and we do know that the armorer on set was not experienced, and if those cutting corners to save a buck led to making certain decisions or omissions in regards to this gun, with live ammo being on set, with the gun not being checked, with Dave Halls, the assistant director, telling Alec Baldwin it was a cold gun. Well, was that gun checked properly? Well, that could have the trickle up effect, Zen, and Alec Baldwin and his production company and this production and those who made the critical decisions may be held responsible.
This is such a travesty. And now that you're framing it out like that, I mean, look, Alec has much to answer for about whether he knew he was operating in an unsafe environment. I mean, he was executive producer of the film and in charge of the set. And then you have the union film crew that apparently, like you said, walked off the set after complaining to the production company about payment and housing. Then Alec Baldwin employed non-union labor to replace them. And yes, Imran, the question is, to the extent that Alec Baldwin authorized the employment of incompetent labor who basically failed to follow safety protocols, he faces serious liability, I would say, meaning if the crew cut safety corners, Alec should be responsible.
Yeah, Zen, let's put the criminal charges that may be out there aside, because I think it's more likely that we're going to be seeing the civil lawsuits, as I mentioned. And yes, those lawsuits are going to be targeting the production company, those who made the decisions like Alec Baldwin. And if it is established that those corners were cut, and we do know that people walked off set, people were had problems with the safety on set. We know that there may be some corners cut regarding a prop master and the role of armor being combined within this inexperienced armorer. And, if that's established that those decisions led to this tragedy, well, you know what? Then there's going to be liability. And those lawsuits most likely will be seeking big money and compensation for the tragedy, for the family of Helena Hutchins, and also Joe Souza, who has a possible claim because he was also injured in this incident.
Yeah, this is so tragic. I mean, I've worked on so many film sets, and my husband is the CEO of Romulus Entertainment. You know him very well, so this is not, we've had guns on film sets in the past, and this is just so tragic. But apparently, less than a week before the incident, a stunt double had fired two accidental prop gun discharges after being told that the gun was cold. Right. So, won't prosecutors argue that this put Baldwin on notice that there were gun safety issues on the set?
Yes, and you stole the word right out of my mouth, notice. And notice is a really important concept in the law, whether it be something that may be the sort of foundation of a criminal negligence charge in the criminal sphere, but also notice in the civil sphere of law. And that's the lawsuits. Those are the wrongful death lawsuits that may occur from this, and the personal injury lawsuits. And notice is a big thing. Were you on notice that there was an unsafe condition on set with these guns and the way were being handled? And even if you had that notice, or should have had that notice, did you not remedy the situation or take action to make sure that the set was safe, and also those firearms were treated in a safe manner? And if that notice is established, then yes, there could be great legal ramifications for Alec Baldwin as producer, the production company, and all the other individuals on set who may have had the role in not safeguarding these firearms or handling them properly.
That's insanity. It's just plain insanity what is happening here. I mean, prosecutors are going to want to go into the safety procedures that should have been enforced, such as how live ammunition got on the set and who inspected the gun before it was handed to Alec. But what about other factors that the jury may consider, right? Helena Hutchins was a highly respected cinematographer. She was 42, married, and the mother of a 9-year-old son. Obviously, these factors are going to weigh heavily upon the jury's deliberations, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. If it ever gets to that point, Zen, that is before a jury, then the jury in a civil case will have to be considering all these factors. Was there notice, as we discussed? Who handled the gun, and who had the responsibility to make sure that that set was safe and that those firearms were safeguarded? Those are all going to be things that the jury would consider in a civil lawsuit to find whether the negligence was there,
Right.
who was at fault, who was negligent, and who would be liable, and ultimately award compensation to the families, and also possibly Souza himself. Then on a criminal side, the jury would be considering criminal culpability, and whether it rose to criminal negligence, and whether the actions are sufficient to rise to those criminal charges that may be out there. We don't know. The investigation continues.
Yeah, I mean, look, his civil liability to the Hutchins family would seem to be a slam dunk. Yet, here's the interesting part. New Mexico is the Wild West. It's legal for most adults to openly carry guns in public without a license. Licensure is only required for a concealed loaded gun. Violate the law, and it's a petty misdemeanor, the legal equivalent of a slap on the wrist. What's your take on this?
Well, those are the gun laws of New Mexico, right? And this is in a different context, somewhat, Zen, because this was a confined area with a certain purpose. This was a film shoot. These firearms were not being used, say, for target practice, for hunting, that would put themselves in the sort of category of the New Mexico gun laws. These were specifically being used on set. I don't think that there should have been any live ammunition on set. I don't know how that round may have found its way in that gun, and how it found its way in that gun, and why it was not properly taken care of or omitted off set. But we are under this sort of area of law which will be looking at the particular circumstances here on set. And, listen, we're saying, what is Alec Baldwin liable? We don't know yet. The investigation continues. But like I said, the people who were in charge of and making the decisions on that set, whether it be the producers and that on the upper level, there's tends to be the trickle up effect. And if you didn't make the right decisions, if you cut corners and that led to this accident, this incident, this death, well, you know what? There's going to be legal ramifications for it.
Yeah, it's so tragic. I can't even compose myself with an end out in this one, because I get overwhelmed just putting myself in that position of I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like. It must have been a nightmare for these poor people that were working on that film set. But I've been handed guns in my career for lots of scenes, scene combat and whatnot. And one of the important questions of whether it's negligent in even such circumstances to point the gun. I mean, even if unloaded towards another human being, I mean, I always assume the risk that the gun is loaded, so I would check if somebody hands me a gun. But in this case, nobody checked, not Baldwin and no one else. And that's where I think the tragedy that unfolded. But we're out of time, Imran, and I love talking with you. So please come back next week, actually, and maybe we can fill in the gaps a little bit further as this case continues to evolve.
Absolutely, Zen. Let's do it. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Guys, that's Imran Ansari, partner at ABK Law right here in the city, legal expert, all of the above. He's the guy you need to talk to when things hit the fan. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this. That was our scandal segment.